At long last, the full Astral Express crew are getting their update. First, it was the Trailblazer, and now, with the 3.6 beta finally in full swing, we have all the official information for March and Dan Heng's new 5-star upgrades. Now we're just waiting for upgrades for Welton Himiko. There's a lot of info to get through, so I'll quickly explain what both March and Dan Heng do, where it looks like they're meant to be played, and how strong they're currently looking. But first, a word from the sponsor of today's video. LD Shop is a safe and reliable top-up site that allows you to buy currency across multiple different games, including Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, among other games. They offer prices at a discount, from anywhere up to 13% to 25% cheaper than topping up in-game. Not only are the prices cheaper, but they make topping up completely effortless. All you need is your server and game ID, and you're good to go. No hassle at all, and no personal information required whatsoever. After purchase, you can see that the Jades are sent to my account within 5 minutes. There are no downsides to using LD Shop for your purchases, as the prices on LD Shop are strictly better than the prices in-game. But the upsides don't stop there. Users who register using my link in the description below will get an exclusive 15% and 5% coupon, which can save you up to $50. Additionally, if you spend $80 in total, you can earn an Express Supply Pass for completely free. If you want to top up at discounted prices with no downsides, using a website and method that has been approved as safe by multiple large content creators in the space, then click the link in the description below to head over to LD Shop and start saving money on your gacha game top-ups right away. So let us begin with the main face of the game herself, March 7th, otherwise known as Evernight. March is entering her emo phase, her goth era, and I love that for her. But what about her kit? Evernight is an Ice Remembrance character, and her kit does a lot of things all at once. It can come across as rather complicated, so I'll break it down as simply as I can. First of all, her basic attack is just a standard basic attack, nothing special. Her skill summons her Memasprite, the jellyfish named Evie, but it should be noted that her skill doesn't cost a skill point and instead drains her HP. Already, you can see how she seems to synergize with a certain other HP draining Remembrance character, and that synergy is only going to continue to be apparent. Her skill also increases the crit damage for every Memasprite on the team, because why not? If her jellyfish Memasprite was already summoned, then the skill instead heals it, so no matter if you're summoning or healing the jellyfish, you're giving lots of charge to Casterus every time Evernight uses her skill, and she can spam her skill since it costs no skill points. Casting her skill also gives her 2 stacks of Memoria, which we will discuss later. Evernight's ultimate will also summon Evie if Evie wasn't already summoned, and then it deals AoE ice damage to all enemies, and then it puts Evernight in her enhanced state, which we'll talk more about in a second, and then it makes all enemies take 20% increased damage, which is basically a 20% vulnerability debuff, and then it increases Evernight and her Memasprite's damage by 100%, and then it makes Evernight and her Memasprite immune to crowd control debuffs, and then it makes Evernight's skill now give 12 stacks of Memoria instead of 2, which we'll talk about in a second, and then it enables her Memasprite to use its own enhanced skill by giving March 2 charges of the enhanced skill, and then it waters your crops, and then it does your taxes, and feeds your children, and guarantees your next 50-50 win, and buys you the winning lottery ticket. So, if you're going to ask what exactly March is supposed to do, the answer is yes. Her ultimate does have an energy cost of 240, but as we'll see, she has ways to get around this. For her talent, this is where those stacks of Memoria that she's getting from her skill finally come into play. Oh, but first, her Memasprite. Her talent states that her Memasprite has a base speed of 160 and inherits 100% of March's HP, so obviously an HP scaling character. Additionally, whenever she or her Memasprite lose HP, she gains 2 more stacks of Memoria, and also increases her and her Memasprite's crit damage by 60%, in addition to her regular skill also already increasing the team's Memasprite crit damage by 40%. So there's a lot of buffing in her kit, while she's still also dishing out a lot of damage. Now, as for what these stacks of Memoria do, when Evernight has 16 or more Memoria, the Memasprite jellyfish immediately takes action and becomes immune to crowd control debuffs. This action advance for her Memasprite can only happen again after the Memasprite has used its enhanced skill, which, if you don't remember, Evernight gives her Memasprite 2 charges of the enhanced skill via her ultimate. Now, to talk about what Evie the jellyfish does, Evie doesn't have quite as much personality as little Ika, but that doesn't stop him from packing a punch. Or her? It's probably a girl, considering it's named after Evernight herself, right? Anyway, Evie's regular skill is very underwhelming. It's a single target attack with very low scaling. Evie's enhanced skill, which is obtained via March's ultimate, is where the real damage is at. The multipliers may seem small at first, but that's because the multipliers stack for each stack of Memoria Evernight possessed when Evie launches this enhanced skill, dealing damage to a single target followed by a smaller instance of damage to other targets on the field. After Evie uses this enhanced skill, they leave the field, causing Evernight to need to summon them back to the field. However, remember, Evernight gets 2 stacks of this enhanced skill when using her ultimate. So even though Evie leaves the field after using its enhanced skill, when Evernight summons them back, they'll still have 1 charge of the enhanced skill left over to use from her ultimate. Now, as a Memasprite, Evie also has its own talent abilities. For starters, Evie is immune to crowd control debuffs, and also has increased taunt value. It also loses 1% HP whenever an ability is used, which is mostly just to help maintain the crit damage buff from the talent that gives crit damage every time Evie or Evernight loses HP, and to give an extra stack of Memoria when Evie acts. Secondly, when Evie is summoned, it heals Evernight, which is ironic because summoning Evie consumes Evernight's HP, so in the end, it just offsets the HP drain, which makes you wonder why the HP drain is even there to begin with. Oh, it's there for Casterus ult stacking. Right. Also, Evie immediately takes action when it's summoned. Lastly, Evie restores Evernight's energy every time it leaves the field, whether that be via its own enhanced skill or via dying, but most likely via its enhanced skill, since Evie probably shouldn't be dying with the amount of HP it's building. Additionally, it also action advances Evernight when it leaves the field, because clearly this character needed even more things in her kit. And we haven't even touched upon Evernight's bonus abilities yet. Jeez Louise. Her first bonus ability gives another crit damage buff, depending on the amount of remembrance characters on the team. Don't go thinking this requires mono remembrance teams. The difference in buffs between 3 remembrance characters or 4 is barely noticeable, so you'll be fine with only 3 remembrance characters on the team instead of 4. Her second bonus ability lets her start the battle with an additional 60 energy, and every time she uses her skill or an ally uses a skill, she gains 1 stack of Memoria. Remember, every stack of Memoria serves to increase the damage multiplier of her Memasprite's enhanced skill. So every time I talk about stacking Memoria, you can just think of it as increasing the damage multiplier of Evie's big nuke. Her last bonus ability gives her 30% crit rate for free, no strings attached, no conditions, just because why not? It also makes her Memasprite's big enhanced skill regenerate 1 skill point, even though Evernight can't even consume skill points, just because why not? Oh, and for her stat bonuses, it's all offensive stats, including nearly 20% free crit rate, the most crit rate any character gets from stat bonuses in the game. Yeah, sure. I'm not going to linger on Eidolons. I'm mostly just going to cover the notable early Eidolons, which for Evernight is her E1. It gives a final damage increase to ally Memasprites, increasing based on the amount of enemies on the field. You can think of it as basically 20 to 50% true damage in AoE versus single target. It's a pretty bonkers E1, especially for her supportive capabilities. Evernight's E2 is mostly just a personal damage increase, giving her more Memoria stacks every time she gains Memoria, or basically just increasing the damage multiplier of Evie's enhanced skill by a ton, while also giving more charges of the enhanced skill per ultimate, so Evie can nuke without downtime. As for her light cone, this thing gives more stats than basically any other light cone in the game. It gives her HP percent, lets all ally Memasprites ignore 20% defense, and increases her own damage by up to 48%. Since she's an HP scaling remembrance character like Casterus, her 4-star options are the same as Casterus, which is not much. There's the new light cone, the story's next page, or the battle pass light cones. Aside from those, she doesn't have any free-to-play light cone options that are too outstanding for her. So, after all this, you're probably wondering, wait, what even is Evernight? Is she a main DPS? A sub DPS? A support? A damage buffer? The answer is yes. Evernight is all of these things. You can think of her as the Anaxa of Casterus teams in terms of the role she's fulfilling. She is clearly designed to be a sub DPS in Casterus teams because of how much she benefits other Memasprites, as well as having numerous ways to stack Casterus' ultimate, but she can also take the role of a main carry without Casterus by basically stealing Casterus' teammates. It's very similar to how Anaxa is clearly designed as a sub DPS in Herta teams, but can still function on his own. Overall, Evernight's kit has so many things going for her, while feeling pretty tailor-made for Casterus, and yet still not being restricted by that design. Characters like Anaxa, who can fulfill multiple roles while still being self-sufficient, are some of the best designs in this game in my opinion. So it's a really good thing that Evernight's kit design seems similar to the direction they took with Anaxa, and I'm hopeful to see her potential in the future. She isn't competing with Casterus as a main DPS or anything, so she is still best utilized as a Casterus sub DPS, but just the fact that she has the option to be a bit more self-sufficient is a nice touch compared to the likes of, say, Topaz and follow-up teams. She has some especially ridiculous vertical investment options via her Eidolons and her light cone, but those aren't necessary by any means thanks to her base kit already being really solid. And then there's the it boy of the Astral Express himself, the man who has waited 1,000 years to reunite with us, Dan Heng Permancer Terai. If March is entering her goth phase, then Dan Heng should have entered his golden boy phase, which I guess he sort of is considering his dragons are golden, but I don't know. He kind of just seems similar to how he usually is, compared to March going completely off the deep end. Anyway, Dan Heng PT is a physical preservation character, and his basic attacks are normal basic attacks. The one thing to note is that he is our first attack scaling preservation character. You will see that all of his abilities and even his shields scale off of attack, which is pretty neat. Before we talk about his skill and ultimate, we have to talk about his talent, which is where his dragon summon comes from. The summon is fairly fast, with a base speed of 165, and every time it takes action, it cleanses all allies of 1 debuff and gives a shield to all allies. You can think of it as being a shielding version of Lingsha's bunny, except Heng PT's dragon doesn't attack enemies. At least, not yet. The summon is an action bar summon, so again, more similar to Lingsha's bunny or Jingyuan's lightning lord. It is not a meme sprite like the Remembrance characters have, and is not treated or coded like a meme sprite, so please be aware of that. His skill gives a shield to the entire team, scaling off of his attack, which generally equals a 1400 shield if he reaches 3500 attack. This shield can stack with itself up to 3 times, up to around a 4000 HP shield, which is obviously a lot. It's actually quite a bit higher than Aventurine's fully stacked shield. The skill also applies the bondmate effect to one designated ally, which summons the dragon summon and attaches the summon to the selected ally. This means the dragon summon will essentially behave as if it belonged to the selected ally. If Sunday buffs the ally with the dragon summon, that ally gets Sunday's full buffs because the character now essentially has a summon of their own. The ally can even benefit from the Banana Amusement Planner set now that they own a summon. The ultimate costs 140 energy to deal AoE physical damage and apply a shield equal to that of his skill to the entire team. It then enhances his dragon summon, making it able to launch a follow-up attack for the next 2 actions that it takes. The interesting thing about this follow-up attack is that it actually scales off of the stats of the character it's been attached to. All of the DPS's crit stats and attack stat, all of it impacts the damage of the dragon's follow-up attacks. However, the scaling of this damage is still rather low since the multiplier is still tied to Danheng. Danheng's technique is similar to Sarudra's technique, where it automatically casts his skill for free at the start of battle, attaching his summon to the character you used in order to enter battle. For his bonus abilities, Danheng buffs the teammate who has the dragon attached to them by 15% of his own attack. This means you want to stack attack on Danheng to make the most of his attack buff, since it technically has no upper limit, so it can make for a pretty decent attack buff, generally around a 500 attack buff if you reach 3500 attack on Danheng. His second bonus ability is essentially a built-in Von Whack, action advancing him by 40% at the start of battle with no conditions. Since his technique already attaches his summon to a character at the start of battle, he really doesn't need this initial action advance for any setups, but it's nice I suppose. His last bonus ability grants himself 5 energy every time the ally with a dragon uses an attack. I must emphasize, this energy is only for Danheng himself. It is not for the ally. Additionally, every time the chosen ally uses an attack, the dragon summon will action advance itself, increasing its speed even more. As you can see, Danheng's shields are not only very beefy, but he also has so many ways to frequently reapply them and stack them via his skill, ultimate, and his summon, which is taking turns at a decent speed. With the frequency of his shielding, and the fact that the upper stack limit of his shield is a decent margin above Aventurine's, it's no exaggeration to say that Danheng is the comfiest sustain we've had in the game thus far in terms of preventing one-shots. While his light cone focuses on improving his sustain capabilities even more, giving him more attack percent for his shields, as well as the very rare shield bonus stat, and even giving him a small bit of healing on his ultimate, all of this is incredibly overkill. Danheng at a baseline is not going to need all of this extra stuff to keep the team alive. His light cone also comes with a minor damage percent buff, but it's really nothing too amazing. I will say that he doesn't have any good free-to-play light cones, since his kit scales off of attack, and there aren't any preservation light cones that synergize with that type of scaling, so you sort of have to just run an off-path light cone with high base attack and no ability, unless you have the battle pass light cone or his signature. But again, he works completely fine as a general sustain with just his base kit, so this isn't that big of an issue honestly, even if it can feel rather awkward. His early eidolons are similarly not too much to write home about. The E1 does give 50% resistance penetration, which is nice, and it also gives 1 skill point on his ultimate, but it's not a game changer by any means. The res pen is also only for the ally with his summon attached. His E2 is mainly just a personal damage eidolon, increasing the frequency and damage of his summon's follow-up attacks from the enhanced state that he gets from his ultimate. The rest of his eidolons offer some more buffs, like a small bit of death shred and vulnerability, but none of it is too outstanding for the level of investment you'd have to use. So all in all, I would say Danheng's vertical investment options are rather underwhelming, but on the other hand, he is very good at what he's made to do in his base kit already, which is keeping the team alive. Danheng is likely going to be one of the comfiest, if not the comfiest sustain in the entire game, just because of how thick and beefy his shields are, and how frequently his summon moves to keep the shields healthy. Outside of survivability, Danheng's only notable utility is his attack buff, which is relevant in a lot of teams, but don't expect to feel the same level of impact from his damage as you would get from, say, Hyacinth. Additionally, whereas Hyacinth is by far the best sustain for the teams that want her, and her presence creates a huge difference, Danheng doesn't quite have the same impact as her in his teams. I know a lot of people were looking forward to how Fainan would be able to make use of Danheng due to them sharing an element and Fainan having a whole trace dedicated to shielding or healing, but I'm sorry to say that Danheng isn't the Hyacinth level upgrade to Fainan teams that you may have been hoping for. Danheng is never the best option in Fainan teams, whether it be in terms of damage or core flame stack generation. option, where he is incredibly lackluster. Even Ho-Ho beats him out in that regard. However, if you need a comfy sustain option, then Dan-Heng is a fine option for Finan, and he is still the sustain that offers the most to Finan in terms of raw damage, just not quite enough to replace the likes of Branya in terms of overall offensive utility. Dan-Heng's actual best use case is just in any teams that use Sunday, because his synergy with Sunday is arguably the main thing he has going for him, where he enables any DPS to make full use of Sunday's skill buff, and he essentially turns Sunday into a shielder, since every Sunday action advance will also action advance the dragon and cause it to immediately shield the entire team. Outside of this special synergy with Sunday teams, Dan-Heng is just overall a fine and comfy general sustain unit, not really made to specialize with any team to the extent that Hyacinth was. It should be noted that there have been multiple leaks and rumors about Dan-Heng being the next free character that Hoyo announced way back during the 3.4 livestream, where they mentioned that we'll be getting another free 5-star in addition to Archer. If this is true, I think his kit makes a lot of sense and is really solid as a generalist, super comfy sustain option that all players can pick up for free. The fact that his E1 and Light Cone aren't super great is a bit unfortunate if he really is free, because then there's really no incentive to even pull on his banner ever, but it is what it is. You can't really complain about getting a comfy free unit. Overall, both Evernight and Dan-Heng PT look like really interesting units, with Evernight mostly being a new vertical investment option for casterist teams, while Dan-Heng is a much more universal and generalist unit who wasn't made for any specific team. I do expect both of them to go through their own changes throughout the beta, so we'll see how strong they actually end up being, but at the very least, just in terms of kit design and how they seem to be intended to be used, I think they're both fairly strong and interesting. It should be noted that we're also getting 2 new relic sets, one being tailor-made for Evernight and the other being a general SP generating relic set that is basically just a better version of the Pacify set. So if you were wondering what to farm for Evernight, I would wait for that relic set to release. Dan-Heng can use a lot of things, be it the new SP generating set despite the fact that it doesn't give him any relevant stats, or just 2-piece sets for more attacker speed. Again, he's just a very comfy generalist unit. So that's my summary of the 2 characters coming out in 3.6. While they may be new, the faces are familiar, and I can't wait to see what they end up bringing to the game in terms of both the story and their finalized kits, which I will continue to cover in much detail as the 3.6 beta carries on. So be sure to like this video if you found it helpful or enjoyable, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. My next video is going to go fully in depth on my thoughts on Dan-Heng's synergy, or lack thereof, with Finan, since I guess I'm sort of the Finan guy. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. And comment down below your thoughts on our 2 Eternal Companions, and how you feel about their makeovers. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time!